Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Ramirez. I'm the Vice President with the World Affairs Council of Austin. I'd like to welcome you all to another one of our programs. This afternoon's program will focus on Malawi and is going to be moderated by the City of Austin's Emerging Markets Program Specialist, Abdallah Mahmoud. Abdallah has several years of international experience working on public-private partnership projects. We're so pleased to have him based here in Austin now. And during today's program, if you should have any questions for our speaker, please submit those to the host in chat. I'll now turn over the microphone and ask Abdallah to introduce our special guest.
Great, thank you so much, Ben. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a great start for the day and an end of the week almost. We're very delighted today to welcome Honorary Consul of Malawi, Mr. Jordan Price. Welcome, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, sir.
The last time we met virtually here in one of those meetings, we hosted the Honorary Consul of Canada in Texas, as well as the Consul General of Canada in the region. Today, we're taking a flight overseas to Southeastern Africa. I know Africa is such an intriguing continent and full of opportunity. And we're very delighted to and excited to hear more about Malawi. So with that, I just want to give you a brief introduction, Mr. Jordan, about our audience. They're a mix of international business leaders and investors, both from the public and private sector in Austin. They're very active in the international space, each with their specific subject of expertise area. So with that, I'll be fielding some questions from our audience as we go. And with that, I would like to start with you. I personally did not know much about, Malawi. I know it existed. I know Malawi is in Africa, but my knowledge was, on the surface. And I'm very excited to learn more about this. Again, Africa is a very, very interesting continent. So why don't we get started if you just give us a bit about your background and how you became on the post of the Honorary Consul in Malawi. I believe that was back in 2017.
Well, yeah, so I worked in Malawi and lived in Malawi for several years, loved it, came back to the States, went again. I've worked in a few different places in the country. And I just sort of fell in love with the country. It's a gorgeous country. The people are very friendly, a lot of investment opportunities, very easy to get there, excellent connectivity within Southern and East Africa. And I found myself voluntarily promoting the country. So for about 10 years, I was voluntarily promoting Malawi, saying nice things about it. I once convinced CNN to change a misleading headline about our beloved lake. And one day I received a phone call on my cell phone from His Excellency, the Ambassador in DC. And he invited me to DC. I spent the weekend out there, met all the diplomats, stayed at the residency in Maryland. And at the end of the trip, he said, we've never had an honorary consul in the U.S. Would you want to be our first? And I said, yes, I would love to. I'm honored. So it went through this whole process, and then I eventually received my official letters of commission from the Malawi government. I had to sign an official secrets act saying that I wouldn't declare, I wouldn't share any state secrets of, the government and all. But it's good. I mean, it's a huge honor, obviously, to promote the country. Malawi, it's a peaceful country of about 18 million people. We are rarely in the news. Malawi has had positive diplomatic relations with the U.S. since 1964. Most of our presidents have been educated in the United States. First president was a medical doctor. Current president is a theologian. Previous one was a law professor in the US. Before that was an economist in New York. So we have this long history of really a strong connection with the US government.
That's great. Thank you. So you basically, your relationship with Malawi is pretty organic. You know, you
Mhm.
went there, you've seen, you know, and that's really great. And to your point, so about the investment opportunities in Malawi, you know, I've done a little bit of research. You know, there stands out to me that they are doing exporting to the United States. There
Mhm.
are focus sectors there. So, you know, it would be great if maybe you can shed some light about the ecosystem in Malawi, the top performing sectors. Where do you think
Yeah,
opportunities?
absolutely. So to start with trade, so we have preferential trade agreements with China, Japan, India, and the U.S. And specifically focusing on the U.S., there's something called AGOA, and AGOA is the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Malawi has been a participant with AGOA for 20 years now. And what AGOA does, it allows for duty-free trading between Malawi and the United States with over 6,500 different products. And by product, each product, it would be like a tariff category. So it's totally duty-free. So, so we've got that wonderful agreement. And then looking at Malawi's the continental trade partnerships, Malawi is a member of SADC as well as COMESA. And SADC is the Southern African Development Community, has about 16 members. COMESA is a much larger economic group of countries starting up in Tunisia and almost wrapping down in a C or an S shape from Tunisia down East Africa and Central and back around. So with all this preferential trading, you know, and Malawi is itself has 18 million people, but it's within close distance of over 100 million people. So you have this wonderful market there. In regards to trade within the the U.S. exported $23 million worth of goods to Malawi last year. The top categories of that were wheat. About $6 million worth of wheat were exported to Malawi last year. That makes perfect sense. Malawi does not have a climate where it's possible to grow wheat. So, you know, a lot of our bread flour comes from the US. Machinery, medical devices, optical things, plastics. And then in terms of imports, the US imported $80 million worth of Malawian goods last year. And that was about a 39% increase over the previous year. And the goods that are being imported into the US from Malawi, of that $80 million, $77 million of that is agricultural. Malawi is really well known as an agricultural nation. For many years, tobacco was its #1 foreign export earner. It was about 70% of foreign export earnings were tobacco. Now that's dropped down to 30%. So the country is very eager and actively searching out other investment opportunities because we really need to fill in that gap. Tobacco still, however, brought in, at least from the US, the US imported $38 million worth of tobacco last year and $18 million of coffee and tea. And the tobacco that's being imported is child labor free. You know, the US has obviously very strict labor laws, you know, in terms of products. So Malawi has, I think it's Philip Morris. It's a Philip Morris brand, but part of the Philip Morris family, they are buying their tobacco in such a way from Malawi that it is guaranteed to be free of child labor. On the tea estates, they're not allowing. They now have a minimum age of 18 years old to work in the tea estates. 21 years old in some of the tea factories. There are, you know, it presents kind of an interesting dilemma because if you're a high school kid on summer break and you want to work in the tea estates picking tea or working in the factory to make extra money, that no longer allowed. You know, the tea estates, coffee estates are going out of their way to say we don't even have questions about any problems with child labor. So they're being really diligent with that. The U.S. imports about $13 million of fruits and nuts each year. That would include dried fruit, fresh fruit, juices, about $8 million worth of sugar per year comes out of Malawi, Malawi to the US, and then clothing, it's about 2 million. So there is somewhat of an imbalance here, because the AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, really, you can import 6,500 different, tariff products into the US from Malawi, duty free. But Malawi is really, it's been all agricultural, mostly agricultural so far. Areas of investments, mining, energy, manufacturing, agriculture, of course, agro processing, infrastructure, ITC. But to stop on mining, Palladium has a uranium mine in Malawi that they developed. Malawi has oil deposits, and Malawi they've known about the oil deposits since before independence, which, independence was in the mid-60s. But the country has never exploited its oil, and really focused on other things. So it is something that's out there. Coal, some rubies, phosphate. It's an interesting sort of collection of things. Malawi is geographically located on the Great Rift Valley. The lake is 2,300 feet deep and 360 miles long. So the country really reflects that geology, that topography of continents coming together. So there's a very deep lake, handful of mountains that are at 9,000 feet, 10,000 feet. It's a great diversity of landscape in a very small country, due to the country literally laying on the Great Rift Valley. Even in birds and wildlife, if you look at the US has about 900 species of birds. Malawi has about 650. And it's very, again, the size comparison is quite small.
That is very.
Yeah, and then just one more note, the government has no restrictions on where people can invest, no restrictions on where people can buy land. Foreign direct investment is encouraged. There's currently about 50 active permits for foreign direct investment in Malawi. And anyone who is investing $50,000 or more into the country automatically qualifies for that, which means visas, you can purchase land. The government is very pro trade.
Yeah, and it sounds that they're being very progressive and on focusing on areas, and agriculture is really becoming a very, very important sector, especially post the pandemic and restrictions of.
Exactly.
So it's because I want to circle back on a really important point you said, which is access to the region. We all know, Africa is huge and there's a lot of opportunity there. So could you maybe shed some light on what countries are neighboring Malawi, and what access, that will help us understand
Sure.
how we access neighboring countries and what those markets are.
Yeah, absolutely. So Malawi is a landlocked country, which is sort of one of those unfortunate, sort of actions of history, I guess, that we're landlocked, which does make it expensive to get things out. So our neighbors are Tanzania to the north, Zambia to the west, and Mozambique to both the east and the west. Mozambique is Y-shaped at the top. So Malawi is, snug down with Mozambique on both sides. One of the interesting things about that is infrastructure in Mozambique has major challenges. And some large resources have been developed on the western sort of leg of Mozambique. And the easiest way to get those resources out was by constructing brand new infrastructure inside Malawi. So Malawi benefited from these mineral discoveries in Mozambique. Malawi has had a railroad the last 100 years, Central and East African Railways, and our rail lines have been upgraded, brand new sleepers, brand new rails, tracks, everything, locomotives, which is wonderful. We've had a lot of road upgrades due to that. I mean, for flights, it's about a 2-hour flight from Malawi to Johannesburg. But the great thing is looking at the preferential trade agreements, is that we have special agreements with the EU, with Japan, China, India, and COMESA and SADC. And if you're looking at all of the member states of both COMESA and SADC, you're really encompassing almost all of Southern Africa, all of East Africa, and then curving up to Tunisia as well. So it's sort of fantastic that we have those great agreements in place.
Best of both worlds, kind of.
Exactly, the best of both worlds. And Malawi has always been very pro-West, even during the 60s and 70s, with the African Union and everything else happening on the continent. It was Malawi often sort of prioritized a relationship with the West and really try to promote that, encourage development. Just sort of an interesting part of the history.
Absolutely, and we know all about African countries. The majority are youth, and that's really how the opportunity and why the world is very interested in Africa, because the youth is so high. So the growth, and I'm sure Malawi is kind of the same percent.
I mean, it's also a great opportunity in terms of manufacturing, because although people think of Malawi as being very much an agricultural economy, our wonderful, working with our trading partners, you can import all of your packing material, directly into Malawi from China or South Africa. So instead of, if you want to look at sort of a traditional model where your commodity is boxed up, taken out by rail or by ship, makes it to the US or Europe, is packed up there, a lot of that is now being done in Malawi. So due to these wonderful trade agreements, all of the packing material, all that stuff can be shipped into Malawi, oftentimes duty-free. Malawi has very low labor costs, so the entire package can be put together, assembled within the country, then it's put into a container, and then it's taken out of the country. So it's a far more affordable option than paying someone in Antwerp to do that, or Houston. In terms of actual costs, it's usually about $5,000 to get a 45-foot container from Malawi to the US. Sometimes between 45 and 90 days by ship, to give an idea to people if you're thinking about bringing things in. One of the wonderful things is that I lived in the country for a period of time. I own a farm in Malawi. I'm in contact on a weekly basis with my colleagues at the embassy, with colleagues in the Malawi government back home, as well as business owners, both in the US and Malawi. So I receive phone calls on a weekly basis, people wanting to do business in Malawi or purchase a product in Malawi. And it's very easy for me to pick up the phone and call someone in Malawi and say, I've got an American and they want to buy textiles. These are the requirements. Who do you know? Who can we match up immediately? And it happens on a weekly basis where I link people up. A lot of times it's just for research, for people to understand the market a little better.
That's similar to Austin, collaboration is big. And that's really the strength of Austin. I know we have 5 minutes left. I do have a couple more questions that I want to ask. Some are from students. So just
are these audience questions or are these your questions?
No, these are audience questions. My questions are more towards
all right.
Trade, but this is more that has to do with tourism. So you did mention a lake that you have corrected CNN. I would be interested to know. But can you tell us a bit about the highlights of tourism in Malawi?
Sure. So Malawi has beautiful national parks. You can go to a national park and see lions, leopards, cheetah, giraffes, black rhinos. So you have all those beautiful things. It's a fairly affordable country to visit. So other African countries in Southern and East Africa sometimes charge $50 per day, $100 per day, just as your entry fee to go to a national park. In a lot of parks in Malawi, it's like $7 a day, $5 a day, sometimes up to $15, $20 a day. But really, it's a very affordable country to visit. It's easy to get around. It's easy to travel independently. So you can just rent a car, drive around, see all the sights, or if you want to, you can do a formal safari, where someone picks you up in a nice Land Rover at the airport and drives you around. It's an easy country to travel in. The parks are really gorgeous, and you can travel any time of the year. In terms of mountains, Mount Mulanje is a famous mountain in the country, about 10,000 feet high. There are several mountains that are 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet, giant plateaus that are full of very rare orchids you can only find in Malawi. And then there's tea tourism and coffee tourism. So you can go stay in the middle of a 2,000 acre tea estate in an old colonial planter's home, beautiful rolling lawns, trees, drinking tea and coffee where it's being grown. And you could tour the factory. You can learn how to pick coffee, blend it with tea. And then there's also development tourism in a way, to where if you, let's say you want to take your kids on vacation and you don't want them to get purely a safari sort of view of the country, but you want to sort of see how people are living. You can visit local villages. You can also do fair trade tourism. So you can visit sites that are included in the fair trade network and meet people who are producing sugar, tea, coffee, juices, clothing. Meet them, hear their stories, visit the factories where these products are being made in the country. So you can really kind of see the whole life cycle of different products being done in a way that's ethical, good for people, good for the environment.
And it seems like it's a very safe place to visit, and people are very friendly and accessible. And that takes me to my final.
And curious.
Thank you.
Many times I have found myself in the middle of the country, either in someone's home or in public transportation, and someone has come up to me and said, "Jordan, can you please explain the Electoral College?" Because they've learned about it on Voice of America, BBC, Deutsche Welle, one of the numerous, shortwave, radio stations you pick up. And I've had people ask me, there's thousands of questions they've asked me about strange esoteric things about like President Harrison and Andrew Jackson and the US Civil War and the Spanish-American War. Country music is popular in America, or country music is popular in Malawi amongst the older generation.
Wow, we're the capital of the world, so that's
it's interesting. It's very interesting. But sorry, you asked. I apologize for interrupting you.
No, absolutely. This is really very lovely information. I'm really enjoying listening to it, and I just wanted to give our folks a way, if they need to get more resources about Malawi, know more, get engaged with Malawi. How do they should they go about it? Is there a depository of a digital place where they can go to get resources, etc.?
Sure. I mean, they can always ask me for information. They can go to the Malawi Embassy website for our embassy in DC, and right on the homepage of the embassy, there's a link for me. So they can click on that, and that my phone number and email address are both on there. It's public information. And then, YouTube is always a wonderful source for information. Go on there and put in Malawi, and you can, get sucked down a rabbit hole of all sorts of things. I mean, the thing to note is that, Malawi is not without its problems, but it's a wonderful country. There's a ton of opportunity. And the government is very pro-development.
That's great. I really appreciate this insight. I mean, I've learned a lot, and I'm surely going to do more research on YouTube about Malawi. I want to see visuals. I know I read a bit. So I just wanted to see if anybody had extra questions to His Honorary Consul before we end our session. I think you're on mute, Ellen. Sorry.
Not anymore. Thank you, Jordan. We've spoken over the phone, and I really enjoyed this. As a historian, the first 5 minutes, even before the program began, was fascinating, and I thought I knew a little bit about that part of the world.
Well, it is interesting because if you look at the sometimes sort of the British, not necessarily British government, but British people in East Africa sort of paint a benign image of the British in Southern and East Africa, but the colonial government built pretty much no schools in the country. They restricted agriculture. The British government did not allow the indigenous people to have farms over a certain size, because they really were 100% focused on, British citizens in Malawi, British nationals, trying to build up that colonial economy. So
that was pretty typical in a lot of other colonial countries also. Yeah.
That is. So it's interesting to kind of look at, where the country was at independence in the 60s, where it is now, and what we can all, what we can all do better as global citizens to help each other out.
I had a question based upon a couple of fascinating essays and my own background in Chinese foreign policy on the role of China in Africa. We tend to think of, the Belt and Road and everything through the stands, but they have a lot of infrastructure investment in Africa, and it always comes with a kind of informal quid pro quo, soft power. Have the Chinese played a very prominent role in building infrastructure in Malawi also?
I guess I would say on the macro sense, you can look at the Chinese being involved in Africa in that they often don't require the same economic changes as the IMF.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was alluding to.
Yeah,
yes.
So you have these global entities in Europe, in the global West, saying, we'll give you money, but you can't give fertilizer subsidies. You can't help out these poor old ladies who need fertilizer and assistance, because that's too sort of socialist communist for us. So we need you to become, a little more free market. And then if you do that, then we'll give you these loans. So there's that part. And then, China really doesn't have those restrictions in giving and in lending. In Malawi, everyone's required to follow the rules. So whether it's a Chinese national or an American or someone who's Belgian, it's the same requirements that regarding foreign direct investment and meeting those targets if you want to invest in the country. There have been some recent prosecutions, so there have been some Chinese nationals involved in poaching in Malawi, and they have been prosecuted.
Aphrodisiacs, they're killing things off to turn them into a powder and sell them in.
So there have been successful prosecutions. So the government has prosecuted. There was a case in which a teacher who was, I don't remember if he was Chinese or Taiwanese, but I acknowledge there's an enormous difference, who was abusing students, and he was deported by the government. So it's the Chinese are not given any sort of special access. It's the same as anyone else. We want foreign direct investment. We desire trading partners, but that cannot happen at the detriment of the locals, the people who reside there.
Interesting.
Thank you, man.
Very interesting. And I'm sure there are more questions that can come to mind. With that, I want to turn it back to Ben. I know we're a bit over, so I just want to make sure that our audience get to where they need to be. Ben?
Well, thank you very much, Abdallah and Honorary Consul Price. This was a really enjoyable and enlightening conversation. So I really appreciate you all taking time to be with us today, as well as I urge all of our attendees to keep an eye on the World Affairs Council of Austin's calendar for future programs, including our Globalist Coffee House discussion on climate. And that will take place the evening of next week, Thursday, November 19th. We also have our ongoing Kosmetsky forums on global investment, finance, emerging markets, and geopolitical risk, which is hosted in partnership with the Kosmetsky Center of Excellence in Finance at St. Edward's University. The next Kosmetsky Forum will feature Africa on December 1st at noon. So we hope to see you then. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful day.